All right. Going live.
Hey guys, Steve here, Ponics. Today we're going to talk about
Growing with fishes. Growing with fishes.
Hey, everybody. You guys are having a great day. Episode 336 of the Growing with Fishes podcast. And today we have Dave Scott coming to us from Jamaica. Thanks for joining us today, Dave.
Thanks, man. It's great to finally talk to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we've had some technical issues on either your end or mine the last couple of weeks, and I'm so happy we're finally able to get it all sorted.
For sure, man. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, before we get started, let me quickly just mention our two online courses real quick, and then we can get started with the show. Here we go.
If you're looking for more education on aquaponic cannabis, please consider the Aquaponic Cannabis Masterclass at apmjclass.com, featuring over 7 days of in-depth, hands-on educational content with Marty and Stephen Reisner as your guides through the aquaponic cannabis universe. We'll cover everything from construction of large commercial facilities, home-sized systems, backyard systems, nutrients, pest control, diseases, everything you can think of, and so much more. So be sure to check that out at apmjclass.com. And if you're looking for aquaponic cannabis or living soil pest control courses, please check out thepestclass.com, where we have a huge in-depth course on pest control, how to make your own biocontrols, as well as in-depth guides and identification guides for a whole slew of different pests that you might encounter in your aquaponics garden. And it's not strictly just geared towards cannabis, it's also geared towards vegetables as well. So be sure to check that out if it's something you think you might need to improve in your education.
Well, certainly have an exciting episode for you guys today. Those of you that don't know, Dave Scott is an extremely experienced breeder. He's been around a very long time and grown all different types of genetics around the world. We were just talking before the show about how many times him and I have been in the same country and either not in the same part of the country or just missed each other by a few months, multiple times over traveling around. So we were kind of getting a kick out of that. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for talking to us about your wonderful experiences in the cannabis universe.
Oh, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, man, you just keep coming up in my reality all over the place, from my friends in Thailand to my friends in Jamaica asking me without knowing that I'm talking to other people. That yeah, so it's kind of like karma kind of pulled this introduction together, and I'm planning to head to Thailand in probably August, maybe September. I'm feeling kind of exhausted after this big Jamaican push breed that's gone on for a year now nonstop. But yeah, for sure, I'm super stoked to talk to you guys and share what we've been up to. Been literally going through a lifetime of genetics and trying to get in there, because I've been working in corporate cannabis nonstop for like 7 years now, and it's the first time I've actually been able to get into my own stuff and just grow. So I've been going through a lifetime of seeds and hybrids and shelved work. You know, that's where I started on something in Canada and bred it maybe to an F3, but never got to do that again because I ended up in Jamaica. And so all those projects and all those various genetics that I've worked with over the years, I try to dig into the collection and germinate everything that could. And, you know, there were some disappointments, but I would say that about over 85% of the work that I've done, say since like even into the 90s, my Cambodians are still going, but yeah, probably slightly over 85% actually made it. You know, those losses are always kind of sad. And cracking some of the seeds that I haven't cracked in years, like the one we sold 18 years ago, is Accidental Haze, which is a old Mexican red hair cross Colombian red. And those are heirlooms that didn't come directly. Like now I'm working with with plants right from Colombia, but those are heirlooms from like Arizona breeders back in the early overgrow days and stuff. But every time I grew these plants back out, it was like a trip down memory lane for me, because the smells and the entoilances of each one of those strains brought me back to a different stage in like my breeding and cultivating time, you know. So like popping a lot of the stuff that wasn't, say, my primary cup winners, but was in the running back when I like won 2004, 5, 6 cups, you know, in Holland. It was just kind of amazing to dig back through those and smell the smells and realize that how important that preservation work is too, you know, because I mean, in my 33 years of working with the plant, there's so many things that I took for granted I'd be able to get again, or, you know, that just were in that moment that just aren't anymore. So yeah, as I've got older, I put a lot more value on the heirlooms and the foundational strains than I do a lot of the hybrids, because I mean, that's where it all started, right? Kevin Jodry was just here from Humboldt, and with the Marina boys, who are like the Cuban Black Haze and the Piff Haze guys from New York, and they were blown away by strains like really well bred line of Acapulco Gold, for example, which is part of all the early stuff from Skunk One. And I have a pheno in that smells like green apples, and Kevin Jodry was so surprised. He smelled it. He's like, man, it's like somebody melted down a green Jolly Rancher, you know. And this isn't new. It's become more frequent by inbreeding and selection for many years. But, you know, a lot of these strains did exist historically. And I think now more than ever, now that we're in a time where the sort of motivation behind, you know, why people grow and what they'll grow has changed, because the value of cannabis, at least in North America, has changed, you know, like, and so a lot of the stuff that weren't big sellers for me back in say 2000 to, you know, until 2015, because everybody was concerned about bag appeal, you know, flowering times, height, all those aspects now are kind of gone out the window. And we have a lot more people, because of the, you know, the lack of regulation and stuff, that are willing to grow these super exotics and plants that didn't really fit that prohibition model. So in many ways, in spite of some of the depressions around cannabis, I think that we're entering a new phase of like going back to the old foundational strains, and just like a new birth of cannabis genetics, and a new birth of exploration of non-typical genetics. And so that's why I think that this time's also a really good time for me to like release the life work. And
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm letting go of all the parent lines, absolutely everything, man. Because I've not before, like the Vietnamese black, that was Willie Nelson's mom, right? I hoarded it, and the police took it. It was the last contact I ever had with police. And it was lost, and I've grown every Viet black since. And there's similarities in there, but all it took is one person who predominated those seeds to, you know, bred it down to one clone. And that phenotype could be like kind of lost. But anyways, yeah, it's as I'm getting older, I think I'm becoming more reflective, and my motivation has changed a lot too, having worked in corporate cannabis and knowing what I don't like, you know. And I'm definitely, I guess I've matured in my outlook as a breeder. And so now I'm far more of a preservationalist than I am like an elite line breeder, although that interests me. Yeah.
What traits are you excited to kind of look for in some of the different stuff, or maybe terpene profiles, or some of the other different things that you're excited to search out for that maybe you couldn't do in that other market?
Well, yeah, my other market. So having worked, the last 7 years for me has been working with a company that founded the first commercial gardens in Jamaica and then sold it to Afria, a big Canadian company. And then we did the first garden, some of the first dozen gardens in Colombia. And our focus has always been on EU cannabis for the German market, Israel, Australia. So it's been 22% THC and up, and has to fit into, our basic commercial, layout, whether it's our greenhouses with our lighting augmentation systems and darkening systems, or whether it's our indoor rooms. So yeah, so I'm super excited to really, as everybody that knows me knows, I'm a haze freak and a sativa freak. So what I've enjoyed the most is literally digging in and finding those standouts amongst some of the Colombians, where we're saying, hey, that is where haze got that aspect from, right? Or like my skunk one from scratch, which actually started in 2003, which is rebreeding. That's how I met Sam the Skunkman in Holland. Is him and another guy, Rob Clark, had read about what I was doing way back on Overgrow, and they came and checked out this skunk one that I bred from heirlooms, right? But yeah, so really, what I'm enjoying the most is digging into those heirlooms. And really, I refer to inbreeding and selection of heirlooms as polishing them, right? Going through as big in numbers as I can, and really bringing them down to, to their highest standards, but without inbreeding, say, to type or to cubing it to a line. I'm also enjoying doing a lot of work for equatorials, which is what I've been working on for the last while, where I'm taking and making hybrids between stuff like my Super Lemon Louse is Love Potion cross Haze Skunk, which was actually bred by Skunkman from when I gave him the Love Potion, cross to Super Louse Haze, and making great hybrids for the equator, for outdoor, that don't require a photoperiod extension to yield decently in a reduced kind of number of days compared to typical equatorial. So really, I'm breeding plants which are sativa dominant hybrids that are specifically bred towards being able to be cultivated from seeds at the equator. That's been a huge part of what I've been working towards. Again, what I mean by seeds at the equator is without photoperiod extension lighting. We just planted about an acre right now of a bunch of those hybrids that I've been working on, and we'll be capturing and recording them and sharing data. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a part of the market that really isn't being catered to much as far as equatorials or just heat tolerant stuff, or even places like the southern US. The stuff that grows on the coast certainly is different than what we were growing in Oklahoma. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've done a whole bunch of hybrids, but using my Acapulco Gold line, which out of all my Mexican Colombians, it's my personal favorite. I think it's Kevin Jodry's favorite, like comparing it to Oaxacan or any of the other plants I have. Although he really was big on the black seed too, which is an old Mexican hybrid that's kind of a Canadian heirloom from the interior of BC, kind of an old hippie variety he really appreciated. But yeah, it's nice to have the level of freedom we have now to really practice our craft. I started working internationally before we were really in that kind of a situation. I was growing and breeding in Mexico in like 2005. And that's where a lot of my work really started. And it's really where I learned the core of, of how I was able to come into the legal market and know how to set up fields and irrigation systems sort of ahead of, the times. Yeah, it's been really interesting watching everything change, as I used to chase the world around where I might be able to squeeze in a crop because of tolerance or circumstance, just so that I could do like a population growth, basically a population being like 10,000 plants or more. And now I've had my full. I got to be honest, guys. Now that I've operated some big stuff, I'm like, yeah, been there, done that. I don't really like to grow more than 2 acres of canopy now. 7 acres, even with 38 staff in Jamaica, was a hell of a task, as our friend Bob found out when he took over after I left the country. yeah, it's been, and same with that 1.2 million square foot EU GMP facility in Ontario was a ball buster, man. Being regulated by Health Canada and GACP GMP and having independent fucking regulators. So I had input allowances that under GACP GMP that were banned by Health Canada, and the opposite. So I was fucked and quarantined in certain circumstances. I just couldn't use anything. Like, for example, pyrethrin is okay under GACP GMP, but it's banned in Canada because it can be harmful to honeybees. Although I don't know how honeybees are getting in our 1.2 million square foot fucking greenhouse, right? But yeah, I've been dealing with the bureaucracy of modern cannabis, and yeah, it was seriously painful. And let's face it, the best cannabis is grown, in my opinion, under the sun in 1 acre or less patches around the earth. And then we have some really elite growers that grow under lights, of course. But I really feel that some of the finest cannabis on earth, whether it's indicas or sativas, are grown under the sun in the proper environments, by people who love cannabis, not by people who love money. And that financial thing has always been the bane of sort of the breaking point of relationships in cannabis. It's I've seen greed just destroy so many people and so many relationships. And a lot of times the greed is based on speculation and not even reality, you know? Yeah, I'm a weathered veteran of corporate cannabis. Yeah.
Wanted to also welcome Josh and Dutch Blooms. I know he was excited to ask you some questions as well.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, bro, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing, man?
Good, man. We have a mutual friend in Kevin.
Oh, he's a fucking great guy, man.
Yeah, and we were talking to him when he went down there, and I think he sent you some of my stuff, and we may have even done some exchanging via him in the past.
All right, on.
But it's nice to meet you, though.
Nice to meet you too, man. Yeah, Kevin was down here and he got on an old school trip. I had literally a massive collection of heirloom sativas and hazes, and him and the Marina boys were just like, and you know, Kevin smokes those cigar sized blunts, right? But he said to me when he got back into California, he's like, man, everything's so narcotic here. I'm stoned.
Yeah.
He was high here, right? From the
right.
sativa. And he got there and he was stoned.
That's cool, man. No, it was really cool to see the videos that they were putting up, and I'm excited to see, you know, what comes out of it. It looked like just a phenomenal trip, and cheers to you for the work you're doing, bro. Really, really, really interesting stuff. Like I've been, you know, at it for a little while, not as long as some people, but I'm stuck in that indica dominant game, you know, that like, you know, exactly what you're talking about, that narcotic thing. And so I would love the experience to get myself out of that. You know, I don't think I actually have the willpower here in the States to just like stop smoking indica dominant stuff. But I think down in a tropical place like that, I would really fucking enjoy it. It's good work, man.
There's a friend of mine, Todd, in Canada, and he's actually how I met Bob, because Todd came here on my recommendation to do extraction at the facility we sold to Apria. I'm just saying this for Steve because we have a mutual friend here in Jamaica. But and you know, I've known the kid since he was 19 years old. You kind of remind me of him. But he's a big time indica. King, which is Pink Kush's mother, was his favorite strain for years and years. And what I've noticed is that when guys get around 27 to 30 years old, all of a sudden, a lot of times you'll see them gravitate towards the hazes and the more sativa lines. It's almost like when we're young, a lot of us like at least in the BC crowd, really gravitate towards those indicas. And as we get older, it's like as your palate matures, I think that a lot of people will sort of move into those sativas. But I think that a lot of people don't have access to real sativas either, and so there's some misunderstanding of what things are sold as today, right? Like a lot of the stuff that I see at a cup that's a sativa, I would class definitely a hybrid. So I think that with this renaissance, that's the word I was looking for before, of sort of heirloom and foundational strains. And I don't use landrace anymore, because landrace kind of denotes that something that's left to itself to self-propagate. And so I think heirloom more correctly describes a lot of the cultivars that we're collecting from countries like Colombia, Afghanistan, Pakistan. I mean, there's parts and parcels where, plants are feral, and that nomenclature of landrace, which I really coined years ago, would be more correct. But today I like to use heirloom. But yeah, and a lot of the work I'm doing right now is true F1 hybrids between 100% sativa plants and 100% indica plants.
That's where the fire's at.
Yeah, a lot of the time, yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Can I just take a different angle on the conversation? And if it's not okay, you guys can tell me. But yeah. I'm really curious about your history and sort of the past, like the Pink Kush, the Willie Nelson. Just I don't know you that well, and I suppose that a lot of the listeners here may not know you, and I know that you have a big history. So like, I'd love to hear just some of that stuff, the older school stuff too.
Well, yeah. So when I first went to Holland was like 2003, and we didn't know what Kush was, like what America was calling Kush. And so when we went there, I was exposed to OG and a couple of other varieties, like the original, when OG was a single strain before it was like every different strain was an OG. And we tasted it, and as soon as we tasted it, like, man, this reminds us of King. And King was always, by my mentors, called hash plant because it came from the hash producing countries. And so we tasted that, and so we called Pink Kush because it had pink pistils, and it tasted like what the Dutch and Americans were calling a Kush. And we wanted people from outside of our circle to understand a description of what King was, right? And King came from Pakistan. It's a Pakistani. There's a whole history to BC flower that's kind of independent of the rest of the world. And it's called King because there was a motorcycle club called the King's Crew. And they were some of the first commercial growers, like successful commercial growers. And they had this guy named Julio, who was actually an American who was a trust fund kid who came to Canada, to Vancouver Island, because of the whole draft stuff, right? His parents wanted him up there to protect him. And but he was kind of a stoner kind of hippie kid, not really a biker. But he got to know some of these bikers, which King's Crew became Hell's Angels in like 1991. But that's a history of that particular, and that plant back then was called King because it was their thing, right? The King's Crew's main strain. They grew that in 2 or 3 other hash plants. There was Pink King and Purple King, but all those indicas were just called hash plants. And from my mentors, and like my mentors would now be like 90 years old, some of them, right? Like Julian and stuff. So they're old time cats. But these guys were growing under mercury vapor lamps back in the day. That's how long they were growing. But so the King was my foundational indica, and it's really long flowering, right? So is the Pink for an indica, but it is like a true 100% indica. I've done a ton of work on it in the last like 4 years, because we made a King BX3 because the clone had drifted so hard. But that's the foundation of Pink Kush. And Pink Kush in Canada is like OG is to the US. Like it's the most popular strain. And I always thought it would wane, and it's kind of I've given my head a shake a few times because I didn't anticipate the Pink would like have the length of time that it had, sort of as being a big cultivar in the Canadian market. I was told it was big in Colorado too. I didn't actually know that till recently.
I think, I had a cut that was called that. I don't know if it was the actual deal, maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago. I'm in Bellingham, Washington, just over the border from BC.
Yeah.
It
probably was, yeah.
It might have been the right thing. Yeah. That's good. That's really interesting. So what did you cross into that?
So the king originally, the first outcross was with black seed, but that was sort of not marketed. And then there was another strain that we called Charles Kush, and I didn't call it that. I was running a grow store at the time, and I got this. There's this old guy, I can't remember his name, but he was like, a lot of the guys from BC that listen to this know who I'm talking about. He's this old construction guy. Again, like at that time he was 70 something, and he gave me a clone. And I think it was like a master Kush, like a early MK, but nobody really knew what it was, right? It was a clone that came to me at the store, and I was selling clones, and weren't given a name. We just said he just said it's Kush light, because the Kush, purple Kush, and all that was just starting right at that time. And and so I sold it out of the grow store, and it just got called Charles's Kush. And so we made a C Kush. That sounds like I'm less of a megalomaniac, so we call it in our circles, we call it Sea Kush. Cross the king, and most of my strains, when I'm talking about a stable phenotype, are BX1s. So I made an F1 and back cross that once to the clone, and that was the original king. And then that was pre-Amsterdam. There was a period of time when I came back to Canada and I didn't have hands on the Sea Kush. And I got some other stuff from like Adam and guys I got to know when I was living in Holland. And so I made another cross. King's a really hard plant to breed with. Like either it lines up or it doesn't. And the abortions are hardcore abortions. It's like one of those plants that if the terpenes align, then you can get an offspring that's really great. But when they don't align, it's not as good as either parent.
Yeah.
So it can be a frustrating one. So out of like 18 different breeds, 3 have stuck with that plant. But when you hit it, you really hit it. Look at pink. So the post Amsterdam version was MK Ultra, cross king. And so there's the pre and post. See, there's 2 different cuts around the island. And there's one we called Ultra King that we want to cut for like in Toronto, Canada. And that was just the F1 between MK Ultra and King. That's Ultra King, right? Was one of our cups was with that. Then the Love Potion was Santa Marta Colombian Gold cross G13. I made various different incarnations of it, but it was just a sativa leaning F1 that we actually won the cup with, and that was a 2004 first place seed cup in Amsterdam. And then 2005 was the first year that I worked with Barney Swarm. Barney Swarm wasn't yet into seeds. They sold like 2 seeds that Mao from Nirvana made, which was like Laughing Buddha and Sweet Tooth. They weren't really a seed bank yet. And so I partnered up with Barney's, and we actually won the 2006 High Life with Pink Kush, and we won the 2005 Best Overall Strain with Willie Nelson, and like the main event. And the Willie Nelson is the Vietnamese black, and we use the Highland Nepalese, the same one that I shared with Ace in 2003 that they bred Bangi Haze with and stuff, that Nepalese. Tons of people have had their hands, and you know what? I can't take credit for that. That strain was given to me by Stephen Tuck from Humboldt, California, way back in the day. Steve and I were working together around the time that he, collaborating, around the time that he bred the Harawana. That's why I have the Petrolia head stash as well. So a lot of our genetics came from like a small circle of like different people between California and Canada sharing things back and forth, right? And so there was those, but so many others like the
Willie's wild, man. I had a copy of the Willie. I don't have it anymore. I just lost it within the last 6 months, but it's wild. It's a wild flavor. For sure.
I have a new line, and we call it Willie 2.0, and it's more of a Willie Haze. So I took an elite cut of Willie, one of the best that we've ever had, and I outcrossed it with my 4-way haze, which is
nice.
And it's an elite O haze that we went through a huge hunt for in Jamaica with Old Timer Haze. And it's crossed to a hybrid between a C5 IBL and an A5 IBL. That's 4-way. What I learned about hazes, and I've been doing a lot of work with them for the last 7 or 8 years, is that you just don't inbreed hazes. So you'll hear us speak of 2-way haze, 4-way haze, 2-way. We have 2-way number 1 and 2-way number 2. Number ones are long flowering, number twos are short flowering. So that means that I'm working more along amnesia super silvers and not Nebbles or C5A5s. So that's our number one and number two. But I've really done some really work that I really love with our hazes. But the new Willie, I took a super elite haze line. I bred it specifically. The 4-way number one was bred for males. It wasn't even bred. I didn't care about the females. I was trying to find a line that would impart, hazy characteristics. And we made a ton of different work on a hash plant clone because it was the fastest flowering we could get to sort of test the, the inheritance, and what was passed on by those haze males. So this new one is Willie cross 4-way. And it's the seeds that I just produced are an F4.
Nice.
And it's just, it takes everything that's great about Willie and puts a little bit more complex churchiness to it, that sort of churchy incensey kind of, which really already kind of jives with that carroty kind of thing that's going on with Willie. It depends on the cut you have, but Willie already has those sort of haze-like characteristics, but this
It's,
really
it was almost greasy, dude, like the smell of grease. The cut that I had, and I think it came to me by another name, and then I was corrected.
Oh, is it they sell it to you as monkey paw?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one of my ex-employees.
Okay.
Who got some lines, and I'm not even going to give much play. It was just on another podcast recently.
It was given to me from Kev as monkey
Yeah,
paw.
I know. Kevin and me went through
Yep.
that, and I know where he got it and everything. Yeah.
Yep.
So with my red Congolese, there's another strain that's friggin' loved, and it was in the exact same breed as the skunk from scratch, right? It's only because it's an Acapulco Gold cross Afghani, cross Congolese landrace. So that's the red Congo. We put that out in 03, and Kev got that. And although they're calling that same group of ex-employees is calling a cut they have called the Roberts Creek.
Oh,
Congo.
crazy. So I have that cut as well, or I did. I had it for a year. Yeah.
But even when we ran it through silos, its only relationship is red Congo.
Red Congo.
Yeah, it's red Congo.
A friend of mine, I put up a conference in Vancouver, and Kev was up there to speak at it. And what's his name? I'm totally blank on his name. Anyways, he brought a cut of it over, and one of these ladies grabbed it and threw it in the truck with her husband, and brought it over, and then spread it out to a bunch of us, to Kevin, me, and brought it down to Humboldt, and so it was nice. It's a nice cut for sure, dude.
Right on. Yeah, it's been around for a long time, man. So that clone was
both those are nice because I think they're shorter. Sorry to cut you off. They're 12 weekers, but they pack that sativa, and the flavor is very complex. It's not just like, forgive me for saying boring haze,
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, we've done a lot of work. I've been doing some work with a Rasta group here on an old lamb's bread cutting that's been around, because the plants are nearly extinct here. That the true old school Jamaican weed. Man, I'll tell you, it makes like A5 haze seem ultra fast. This old lamb's cutting that I got here is like the slowest plant, man. I mean, I have Lao plants that were way faster. Like, it just sat there, and it threw out some pistils, and it's like, wow. Yeah. It's nice smoke when you get it off, but it's literally like 2 crops a year here in Jamaica. So I understand why they it just sort of went by the wayside just because of prohibition, right?
Right.
It's not a small plant either. So but it's kind of sad having traveled around the world. Like Southeast Asia is one of the last bastions where there's still some true beautiful heirlooms, right? I was there in 2019, going through Cambodia, and although in Thailand I saw a lot more hybrids than I'd seen. Like, I hadn't been there since like the early 90s, so a lot has obviously changed, right? But really, when I got into Laos, Cambodia too, but around Laos is really where I found some of the real old school gems that I had picked up, like in Phnom Penh in a guest house back in like 91. And that's what Kevin, actually, one of his favorite strains here was my Orange Pico Cambodian. And that's literally how far back my Cambo 3 and all that Cambodian. There's the Orange Pico, there's the sour Cambodian, Cambodian 3, all those go back to like 1991 in Phnom Penh. Yeah, I was able to actually find a very, very similar cultivar in Luang Prabang, Laos in 2019. So it was nice to introduce that back into some of these, genetically related, but lines that have been inbred for over 30 years, right? Yeah, this is the first time in years that I've been able to grow everything that I want, how I want. So there's been the rebirth of a lot of real old school stuff here in Jamaica right now.
How much longer? It seemed like when you were talking about it, like it might be a term thing. Like, how much longer do you have on the project, or do you know?
Well, I've been here a year now on this one project. I'm wrapping up harvest right now. I have more seeds that we're producing, but I'm pretty tired right now. So I'm gonna head back to Canada for a period of time in probably late July. But my kids are here, right? Our farm is here, so I have a little dispensary opening here as well. So I'll be back. But yeah, so this project won't necessarily wrap up because I have people here that'll keep on running it, but certainly the kind of work I've been doing is kind of coming to an end right now.
So what are some of the traits that you look for in males? I always like asking experienced breeders this question because every single person's given me a different answer. And I'm sure you have some really good observations.
A lot of the best males I've ever had, I'm sure, are going to be mega moms. I mean, I could give you a more complex answer than that, and there is other criteria I'll get into. But a lot of the times I'm like, look at the structure on that, look at it. And I'm actually thrilled and heartbroken at the same time that it's a male, depending on what I'm working on. But no, tons of different characteristics. So I know the line, it's helpful, but like on new lines, I'm typically looking for plants with vigorous growth but good structure, stem rub, and some strains here, like Memories of Afghanistan, our males and our G13 inbred line actually had trichromatic development at their internodes. So stem rub will tell you a fair bit, especially if it's radically louder than its siblings, but yeah, it's just like when you're looking for a great female, you're looking for a lot of great traits, except when we're looking at a male, we have tons of unknowns. I actually just had my first hermaphroditic male that I've had in a lot of years recently. And so I was able to use it as a teaching tool. Back in the day when I first started to breed, I worked on the Cambodian lines that are still existing now. And I didn't understand, where is this coming from? And I actually saw a seed on one of my male plants and it came crushing down. There wasn't the internet back then, guys. We're talking about the late 80s. Or what would have been? No, 92. That would have been 92. But there just wasn't information. There's nobody I could really ask, right? And I remember the lights just came on because I was literally ready to just turf the entire line because I just couldn't, figure out where this hermaphrodism was kept on coming from. And I just right now in those louse plants that I was just talking about found, hermaphroditic males. But yeah, I'm looking for all the same criteria as a female plant that turns out to be a great male. A lot of times I'm not looking for those markers of height and all that other stuff that we were taught back in the day. I'm more just looking at the plant as in some cases as an individual. It also depends on what I'm doing. if I'm trying to maintain diversity, a lot of times I'll use a minimum of 3 males in an inbred line, because I don't want to lose anything. And I also will do with the BX3 that I did with the king. After the king BX3, I do an open pollination where I leave like 15, 20 females, regardless of their phenotypical expressions, and a good number, say 6 or 8 males, and I allow them all to naturally inbreed, and I'll grow out that progeny. Because a lot of times, if I'm looking at a strain that might have like multiple contributing parents, or I don't really know whether the true history of the line is homogeneous, a lot of times on those small open pollinations, it'll unlock and show me exactly what potential parents contributed to that particular hybrid or not. Like with the king, I did the open pollination after the BX3, and I got 2 phenotypical expressions. So that's sort of, which is often what we see with a stable, like heirloom landrace, say an Afghan. We'll have within a population, we'll usually have a tall and a short, or a bush and a pole, right? And that's the same thing I got of the king. So when today, I think that there's a lot of mismanagement because of misunderstanding or say motivations in breeding cannabis that produce good flowers, but aren't necessarily in the best interest of the longevity of the cannabis gene pool. And so I try to not lose anything on a line. And when I have as many lines as I do, it can be frustrating. And that's why I'm pulling my hair out after this year, because I literally try to do things to the best I can, because if I don't do them, I'm not sure who has these genes and who's going to, right? And that's also why I'm at the point where I just want to let it out there and let these aspiring young guys have some material that people have spent some time working, right? So male selection's a pretty important aspect of breeding, one of the most important, but there's no real number one characteristic that stands out other than just being a great fucking plant.
Now those male seeds that you guys had from the hermed male females, were they male? Like, were those seeds male the way that the female pollen usually with the when they herm go on with the females? Does that work the same way with males, where you end up with male seeds?
You know what? I've read something about that, but I'm not educated enough on that to really speculate whether. I heard that a lot of those seeds would be and there was seeds on this plant this time too, because it got put in a male field, so it got mature before I found it. But I heard a lot of those seeds potentially are sterile. But I've never really grown them because I just want to get rid of it as fast as I possibly can. I also do a lot of fem breeding. Because it saves a lot of time. Again, when I was working towards for the EU GMP facilities, where I had very specific criteria on active content, terpene content, for it to even sell it into the German medical market, it had to be 22%, right? So the use of fem cross fem or elite cross elite was something that I used quite heavily in my breeding program, particularly in indicas and indica hybrids over the last 8 or 9 years. I think there's a lot of misinformation out about, feminized breeding, and there's been a lot of people that have just done a real bad job of it without stress testing progeny and making sure that they actually are a good candidate for being feminized or, being selfed more correctly. But I've actually had a lot of really good success on elite lines and making fem crosses. And I've got some photographs of, 12, 15,000 fem seeds in fields in Jamaica here without any intersexual characteristics whatsoever. In fact, we had a higher ratio of intersexual characteristics among our regular seeds than our well tested and produced fems. so, and somebody recently online was asking me, well, if I take one of those fem seeds and use a male on it, will it be solid? And as long as the plant was properly bred, absolutely, it won't be any different than a regular plant. But there's a lot of people using stuff like colloidal silver. And so when we're using like STS or any kind of silver, it's an ethylene inhibitor within the plant, right? A female plant puts out ethylene gas and a male doesn't. So when you inhibit the female's plant to uptake the ethylene gas that it produces as it goes into photoperiod reduction or flowering, it puts out male sexual characteristics, quite simply. Colloidal silver is a partial inhibitor. It's not a complete inhibitor of ethylene. And so it often will sort of put out characteristics more similar to hermaphrodites. And so I've seen a higher ratio of intersexual problems amongst plants that were bred using colloidal silver than STS. But I think the biggest issue with the reason why we're seeing stability issues in a lot of the FEMs coming out of the USA is potentially colloidal silver and just thinking that any plant is a candidate for selfing, and it's just not the case. Even when I'm selfing a plant because the market demands it, unless it's a clone only, I will select 2 siblings within the line that are both elite but have different characteristics within the line, even if it's very subtle. And I'll use a sibling to produce the fem line rather than a true selfing, which is the highest form of inbreeding, right? But yeah, that's something that I've worked with a fair bit, and I have a lot of experience. Like I've been growing out, like tens of thousands of our fem seeds. So I have a really good idea, about, inheritance when using a female to, as a pollen donor. And there's certain, I think there's certain slots of inheritance that aren't altered the same way using a fem pollen on a female as using a regular. So yeah, I think you really have to use that tool in an appropriate way, and maybe look at experimentation with seeing if I produce a regular seed from a line versus a self seed from the same line. Let's see what the offspring are like, and that's what I've done. I've grown them side by side, and so yeah, I really think that the world's really gone towards feminized seeds. So I think we really should educate people on exactly what they're doing and how they should do it and what not to do.
This is sort of a follow-up, but and it's a big question. I know there's a lot of ifs and buts. What are the populations you like to look at? Like how many seeds, do you like to look at on various different angles, like the feminization, the BX, et cetera?
Yeah, like how many am I going through when I'm doing a selection?
Yeah, like you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
so that's a good question. So depending on the line, like the king, the mother of pink kush, we grew about 500 seeds. They're regular seeds. So say we ended up with like 220, real solid females, and then we'll narrow that down from there. So yeah, typically, in a country like here, I grow small plants at high density on raised mounds with T-tape drip irrigation. So I'll do a whole bunch of them, as many as I can, literally at 12 to 16 inch spacing on the raised mounds. And I'll only veg them until the seedlings are self-sustaining, or they're standing up, and I'm not worried about wind. So anywhere from 16 to 20 days of veg, then straight into the fields. And I go through big numbers. I put as many as 4,000 plants on an acre before.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then we go through there and we'll select our production. And how we do standouts is, I had an employee here, Garnet has worked with me since my first employee in Jamaica for 6 or 7 years. Well, you do a flagging model. So when my staff, I have one guy who just scouts insects all day long at the big farms. And anytime he finds something that's problematic, he'll put a piece of orange flagging tape on that plant for me. And when Garnet or my other staff, like my right-hand staff, my foreman, we call them, are going through and they find an elite standout, they'll put a blue piece of flagging tape on that plant. And so when I come in the morning and when I had the 7 acres here, I start rolling around, I just go around and I read the tags.
Right.
And it brings me to the plants. And so usually the boys' eyes, the pest scouter will call over to my foreman and he'll say, hey, look at this one, it's sick, right? And so we're constantly kind of going through and evaluating those plants. You know, and that's and we do that similar thing with sexing too. We put colored ribbons when sexes are confirmed, because I don't always have the ability here to sex, so I'll plant at super high densities, as I just mentioned, and we'll actually sex. And in Jamaica here, I actually is inefficient as this might sound to you guys, I actually culled certain males, had them flag out my killer males, and we actually took the males out of the mounds and moved them to the male fields. And then
Yeah, dude, that's what I do here. I'm a dork like that. I do the same thing.
And then we hand collect our pollen, and it's all hand delivered for the most part, just like I'm doing feminization. It's the only way that I could manage the number of plants. And the other thing that was a real pain in the ass for us here is this has been one of the windiest seasons that my Jamaican staff have ever encountered, and they grew up here. And fuck, man, in order to get a pollination, to get a pollination window, I had to get up with the sun every fucking morning.
Before the wind would get up. Yeah,
the wind would be calm dead from sun up until 10 a.m. And yeah, so we had pollination areas where specific lines were worked in those regions of the farm. But man, yeah, this particular breed was a big juggling act, and like I said, it was the breed that never ends, man. Because I wanted to get through everything and I didn't want to lose anything, right? Because some of the seeds are getting really old, man. We got seeds from 2003 and 2005 to pop, and we have those genetics going again. So I just didn't really know what to expect, right? But I lost about probably like 14% of my collection to non-viable germination, which was a little sad.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. But yeah, things here, you know, I've worked all over the place, and Jamaica sure is an awesome place. The friends that I've made here are lifetime friends, man. It's not exactly a gentle environment, right? I live in Spanish Town. Like I actually really like Thailand and Cambodia. I was planning to retire there. Supposedly 10 months ago, because I kind of like that I don't know, more gentle, quiet kind of consciousness around me, right? But Jamaica is a pretty sweet place. You know, I've spent altogether over 4 years here, going on 5 years here. Yeah, and definitely some of the nicest flowers I've ever grown in my life have been here. Yeah. So yeah,
I was curious when I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
Oh, so when I spent some time down there back in 2016, I spent some time down in near White House and then, up in the hills above it, and in Westmoreland, and they were doing different types of fruit skin ferments for finishers and some of the stuff like that. Are you guys utilizing any kind of more traditional inputs, or are you guys all more commercial with the inputs there at that particular farm?
No, I do a lot of tea brewing. I have a big, you know, the big totes, you know, the shipping totes for liquids.
Yep.
You know, they're caged totes, you know, all over the world you see them. So those are my brewers. I actually have a fish pond, I was going to tell you, Steve, that has red perch in it. And it has, I don't know, probably 20,000 gallons or something. I work with a medical doctor who owns our farm. And so I use the fish water as my tea base. And I can't say that I'm an aquaponic guy, but I know that there's some good stuff in that as a base water. In fact, I put a pipe specifically into my irrigation system so I could close off my main water line and run a submersible into the
Massive high fives, dude. You're the man.
yeah. And I use everything, man, everything that's available to me. Like I'm on a farm, so I have goat, I've got fowl, like I'll use chicken manure. It just depends on, you know, as long as it's well aged and everything. But yeah, I you know, I use bat guanos, locally obtained bat guanos, basically whatever I can. But if I see a deficiency in my plants, which here in Jamaica, I've had a real issue with calcium, magnesium deficiencies. Just the soil, water, everything's different than what I've typically worked with. And so I do fortify my crops with calcium and magnesium. I just have to. I haven't found anything that I can access here that pushes my CalMag value enough to not put the susceptibilities of leaf spot and stuff in my crops here. So about probably, I don't know, once every 2 or 3 weeks, we use a CalMag solution.
That's definitely interesting, and that's certainly great to hear that you're using teas and things like that. There, I was very curious to ask you about that. We did have a question from chat for you. They ask, can you ask Dave if he can share his most successful methods of spreading old seed?
Oh man, yeah, this has been the year to ask me that question, guys. Scarifying and hydrogen peroxide. And then I also do a soak in endomycorrhiza. And that's basically it. Of course, not at the same time because the hydrogen peroxide would kill the endo, but I'm talking once the plants transfer, you know, early into the medium, I have an endomycorrhiza that I'm using to inoculate. And that out of all the, you know, sort of more modern innovations, the mycorrhiza has been something that I really don't grow without. Sorry, you guys, I'm just going to get my daughter to bring my dog in.
No worries.
Guys, can somebody bring Scary in? Sorry about that.
No worries. I have
Just gonna get louder. Yeah. Oh God, that dog is like my best friend though. Seriously, I know people say that it's a cliche, but seriously, that dog like is like my emotional support bulldog. My daughters say that he's special needs, but not to me, man. Yeah. You know,
how's
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say, how's butterfly season treating you? I remember maybe butterfly season there.
We're not terrible at it right now, but those South American tomato moth fucking worms are the worst. We have these I can't remember the genetic name, but you know what I'm talking about. It's the South American tomato moth. Something
The
to
helicopters, or
they're just terrible. Then they lay these caterpillars on our plants that literally like bore mold through your buds. So we really have to be on top of it. You know, in terms, the first time I ever encountered them, I literally got my staff in at night with flashlights when they come out, and we started by physically removing them. But
so,
yeah, go ahead.
So the easy mode with them, and actually I just went over this with some people this week. The easy mode for caterpillars is you get the portable black lights, because like 85-90% of caterpillars are UV reflective and stand out like a neon thumb on a cannabis plant at night. So you use the black lights, have the battery powered ones, and you go through and it's like pick all the neon stuff off the plant. It's pretty easy.
No, that's awesome, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, the other thing that I've been struggling with here is root maggots, or like a termite that eats up my root system and goes up the stalk of the friggin' plants. I heard one of my friends, Fet, in Thailand talking about a very similar issue he's having, and he referred to them as termites. But the one farm that I work at here is just, it's fucking terrible, man.
How we address them. I had to deal with them in Puerto Rico. I think it's a similar species, and they used a combination of boric acid, like sprinkling that in water and then into the soil, and kind of like trying to get them that way, at least near the entrances. And then metarhizium works really well with them. But what I noticed, and something just observationally here in Thailand, so we made IPMO, which is if you're familiar with IMO, it's just adding insect frass as a third of the rice mass for IMO collection.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is the ants would suddenly find the big thing of insect frass and rice sugar when we had it IPMO2. And then the ants would, after that first day or two of the ants, there was no more ants on it. So I think it's working on the ants as well. So you might even want to try collecting a bunch of the ants and seeing if you can't do like a fungal collection with rice in the forest, and then seeing if you can't find a local fungi that you can use against them. That might, and then because you could water that into the root system really well with plants, it's not going to hurt anything. At least it's something to try.
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, if I had to tell you the worst insects we have in Jamaica, that is them, depending on where you are. The root maggots, especially around here in the south, are just terrible. At slightly higher altitude, they don't seem to be quite as bad as they are at sea level. But our soil is this incredibly thick black humus of the highest quality because it was virgin jungle, right? It had guango trees, which are a nitrogen fixing tree. They called in South America, they call them the rain tree. So the soil from these pea pods for years and years is just this beautiful black humus. But I believe that's why the issue is so heavily on that one particular field, is because the field hasn't been cultivated and it's just an ideal kind of environment. I definitely am going to get when we're offline, I'm going to ask you for more information on exactly what you were saying so I can implement it right away, because it's my biggest issue.
I have a whole how-to video. It's about 18 minutes long on my YouTube channel that kind of is step by step, and it's all video. So even if they don't, it's in English, but even if they only speak patois or whatever, they can just follow the directions and just copy the same thing.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Amazing.
Other thing, I just quickly thinking, what about like a Nuni or something like that? Because I know that they use that a lot, pesticides there, and it's pretty readily available. Maybe something like that, like a root drench with some Nuni extract in water or something like that. Just spitballing.
Yeah, we've tried a lot of the local stuff. A whole lot, and I mean we were able to control it, but the point is that we have to be on top of the controls. It's like a constant issue, and if we're not on top of it, it can really get out of control. When I had it before on the 7-acre place, it was more sort of isolated, and they seemed to move together, and so they were localized and sort of moved like a big ravaging pack of maggots. And in this particular place, in that particular field, which is virgin jungle, they're all over the place. It's like, yeah, we just basically have to be completely on top of it.
What part of the island are you on? The west side, the east side, north side?
I'm on the south side.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Never mind. You said you're near Spanish Town. Never mind. You did say that already.
Yeah, the farm, the new farm is right overlooking Hellshire, which is where all the cactus fields and everything are. So it's the driest spot, and it's higher altitude a bit. So I don't think we'll have those issues there, because there's a massive all kinds of crops on the adjacent land to the new farm, and it doesn't seem to be an issue at all. But yeah, not that I want to give up on my current location, but yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges that I've had since I was a new grower, that's for sure. Yeah. I think it's really important to also, I share everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly with people online, and all the different remedies and stuff. I share it. I teach people my STS recipe. It's funny because back in the early days, we were all like kind of uptight and hoarded information and genetics, and at this point, I think that we've been fighting prohibition for so long. It's sad to see the lack of cooperation within the cannabis space. It's looking back over the years, even at myself, I have to give my head a shake at some of the historical aspects of our scene as it's evolved over the years, and how seriously some people take some stuff that we're all a bunch of farmers that fancy a particular plant. And I think sometimes that the entire industry can take itself a little bit too seriously, but that's just kind of where I'm coming from. Yeah, I'm sure you're seeing
What
it in
Oh yeah,
Thailand. Yeah.
I was gonna say,
Thailand is crazy.
particularly the organic scene, we can take ourselves extremely seriously.
Yeah, well, organics is great, and I by far prefer to use organics. But when I get into a situation where, especially in a country like Jamaica, where I don't have any choices, like I was telling you guys about CalMag, right? Trust me, I tried everything I could before making a CalMag solution on my crop. But when I see weaknesses in my crop developing because I just can't seem to give those plants exactly what they need from within my available organic amendments or my knowledge, right? Like, I'm not some arrogant guy who says he knows everything about organics, but I have a pretty good sound knowledge of growing cannabis and soil. But I certainly won't sacrifice to the detriment of the best interest of my crop to maintain a pure kind of perspective or position. Obviously I want to put the very best inputs into a crop that I can, and not be lazy and cut corners, and we'll do the best I can. But I'm not going to risk success because I don't want to give the plants an element that's derived from a non-organic source when that's all I can access. So I've actually had some friends here struggling with other issues, and a lot of it comes down to CalMag and some other issues that I couldn't really tell them how to correct without the addition of these particular inputs. But I'm always willing to learn. But yeah, I think sometimes we all take ourselves a bit too serious as an industry, in that, go onto some of these websites and see some of the dialogue between people and stuff. And I don't know, man, I don't know about you guys, but I went to prison for growing cannabis, and I made a lot of sacrifices, to get the collection I have and to work all over the world like I have. And it's been a choice, right? I could have done other things. I raised 4 kids to adulthood, and this is all that I've done. So at this point in time, now that we've kind of, won ourselves into a position where, where the plant's free, I think it's time for us all to maybe cooperate and try to, get along as an industry and work together.
Amen. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what tips do you have for growing in the tropics? I know you talked about a couple of other things, but what other
Really, man,
maybe
the
tips or tricks or advice for that?
soil preparation. This is what I did with Raga this year. I went into their fields and I saw how they were growing, and I'm like, guys, you need to mound your soil so that you got 18 to 20 inches of raised mound, right? And put all your amendments and everything into that. And also my irrigation system is simple, it's reliable, it's my T-tape. I use it no matter whether I'm in the tropics or not. But really it all comes down to your soil and the proper development and orientation of your crop and your soils. So building the best soil you can from the inputs that you have available to you, but organizing your plants and understanding that when we get into rain, how's water going to flow off the field. So really it's working around your environment and giving your plants sort of the support they need to be proactive rather than reactive, right? So a lot of it comes down to well-designed drainage, soil quality, and irrigation that works well. Those are our key elements. Defoliating, it depends on your humidity level, how heavily you need to defoliate. I've seen some places in Jamaica that I'm running 85-90%. I had mold on the vegging plants in at some places in Jamaica, just because in that rainy season the relative humidity is so incredibly high. So defoliation in those cases, airflow, right? I mean, if you're not fully outdoors and you're even in a, say, a photoperiod extension hut, like I run greenhouses with photoperiod extension, but basically it's just a canopy that collects rain off of the lights, so it's open-sided greenhouses if you want. But even in those, airflow and thinking out, your environment. But a lot of it comes down to, like I said, soil preparation, designing your field systems. Raised mounds in the tropics are a must. Irrigation. I mean, irrigation is so important, and functional irrigation, because there's a lot of irrigation out there that you can put the whole thing together and it's going to be a nightmare. So the first thing we do is we come in and we'll assess our soils, and then we will bring in our tractors and we'll cut our rows. And so again, we'll end up like our rows will be as high as 30 inches when we start pre-amending. And so depending on what inputs we're putting, we'll wheelbarrow that soil off onto tarps, and we'll do all of our mixtures and additives. And we'll sometimes, if I have them, I like to use cement mixers to proportion mix everything, and then we'll dump it back onto the tarps and age it, and then pump that all back into our raised rows, right? And that way we're getting a nice even mixture. So yeah, that's really, really important. I have photos that kind of speak to what I'm talking about, like big acres, like hectarea fields and stuff. But really, there's no way I could have managed the crop levels that I've grown here without having really well-designed fields. So many people make the mistake of dropping plants in holes, and dropping a plant in a hole is not really a great idea when you're in a tropical environment. So yeah, those raised mounds. Yeah. Also, I like to grow a high density of smaller plants. I find when we get into some of the bigger plants in the tropics, we have more issues with, like, this year has been the windiest year in years here. So a lot of my bigger hazes and stuff needed a lot more supports, as where had I established mature mothers of those hazes and flowered the clones smaller, I probably could have controlled their size a little bit better and had more efficient crop management. So it's a matter of assessing, the size that you want and your field density, right? Yeah, there's a lot to input. I think that's some of the errors that I've seen some of my friends making in Thailand too, is vegging plants, to a fair size before they put them out, and trying to manage these, even say like, 5-foot plants. You start to have airflow problems, like I said, breaking limbs, more difficult to defoliate. And if they just mounded, say on a 18-20 inch mound, and planted one clone every 16 inches, their end yield would probably be higher, and their yield per year for sure would be higher. Molds, trimming, all that stuff would be easier. So it's just a matter of getting to know your plant and understanding how to best get, your yield, and start thinking about, when you're on a equatorial photoperiod, start thinking about sea of green outside. That's really some of my recommendations.
I know Kenneth, I had a couple questions for you as well.
I just want to say what's up, fellas. And I'm enjoying the combo. Scott, how you doing, man?
Not bad. How are you, man?
Pretty good, pretty good. I just want to touch base with you, say what's up, and I've been in touch with Pet.
All right.
And we're ready, man. So
Right
ready.
Yeah, I actually just sent some stuff to Pet. Yeah, actually, I was so funny. We're talking about this. Me and Pet had the same conversation. I was sending him pictures, of my best crops here. And
Mhm.
we were just talking about, basically most of my plants end up as 4 feet, in an ideal crop at the
Mhm.
most, say 36 inches. And I was showing him some of the yields that we've got like on high densities. And also I have a lot of the data that on our losses, like, per acre. And so, yeah, I think that some of the information that I've sort of learned about growing in Jamaica could probably be, well absorbed in Thailand for sure. I'm stoked to get there and yeah, grow some plants with you guys.
Yeah, similar to the Caribbean, definitely. A
Yeah.
little bit hotter, but very similar.
Oh, it's really hot here right now, man. Yeah. Yeah, we've had a heat wave. How about you guys this year?
Yeah, I think
It's been
Chiang Mai
real
broke
hot.
a record. Chiang Mai broke a record this year, I believe, in heat for early on.
Yeah, it hit 40. It hit 45. Here. Yeah, it hit 45 here.
Yeah, that's hot for up in the mountains.
Yeah, my hottest farm was Guamo, Colombia, man. Oh my God. It
What was
in the
that at?
40 Oh, Guamo is like 4 hours towards Venezuela from Bogota. And it's in this like plain area that kind of imagine a tropical Oklahoma.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. It's like this plains area. It's surrounded by mountains, but it's like plains and prairie, and it's just fucking ball breaking hot every fucking day, man. And when it rains, it really, really rains. But yeah, we had we grew some fantastic weed there and actually did really, really well on CBD. It's actually the only time that I've really worked CBD and really hit like successful numbers. Not that Dave Watson and I were talking about this years ago when they had us wanting to breed all these 1-to-1s and stuff, and we were like, we spent like 30 years breeding that shit out of the weed so that we get high, and now they want to put it back in. Yeah.
I also had a question. Are you releasing that Bubba?
Yeah, man, I'm working on some Bubba. You know what? It didn't make it in this round.
Okay.
A bunch of my Kush genetics. I won't even get into it, but
That's fine.
one of my staff made a mistake and literally germinating seeds somehow got frozen in Jamaica. But anyways, yeah. So the Bubbas, I have some great Bubba lines. Like my first Bubba line ever was actually 8-ball that released by Barney's Farm. That was the first Bubba work I ever did, and it wasn't really meant to be released either. That was an NL5 cross NL2 cross Bubba. And Derry just got the clone out of our rooms when I worked with him, and he just ran with it and called it 8-ball. But yeah, no, I have some fantastic Bubbas that I'll be bringing out. I was actually just asking Kevin, because I have a super elite Bubba female, that S1 from one of the GMP facilities like that. I kind of did an S1 job on a really elite clone under the nose of my QA. And I was asking Kevin Jodry actually about a really stable Bubba line to integrate into that. But I've got a whole bunch of different Bubba works.
Yeah, I love Bubba. I saw the pig. I saw the structure, and I was like, my goodness, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, man, it's been back. When was I first? I think I got the first Bubba in my hands around like 2002. Yeah.
Nice.
You guys probably had a little earlier down there in California.
It's one of my favorites. It's on my top 10, I'd say, for smoking. I love it.
Yeah, there's a Bubba Cross Pink that's pretty popular in Canada.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. we definitely have some new pink lines, a pink that was bred here in Jamaica. That's just a standout for tropical production. Like my ultimate pink was really selected around, indoor kind of, ideal parameters. But the particular selection that I had that was held here in Jamaica since last time I lived here, and it's still around, just thrives here, and it's not that it's any different than the other. It was just a particular phenotype from a huge number of plants. We grew like, 12 or 15,000 pinks. And this particular pheno just really, excelled in this environment. It's a bit more, I would describe it as viney than a typical pink, but it also allows it to be more flexible in the, in some of the windy conditions and stuff here. So it, it doesn't have brittle stalks. But for sure, I think those are already on the way to FETs right now. Yeah, and a whole bunch of others too. The cherry fresh, which is the cherry bomb indica, cross golden temple, BX1. It's a whole bunch I'm sure that you guys will find kind of interesting because they're not really related to the California lines, right?
Right.
The cherry bomb, is that Mr. Green Jeans cherry bomb or is it a different one?
No, so you're thinking the one I did with Green Jeans Cherry Bomb is called Cherry Bomb 2, and we
Okay.
released that way back in the day. And the Cherry Bomb Indica actually came from a friend of Jack Hare's, like in 2002. When they were doing the hemp car, they did this hemp fueled car in Canada where he was doing a planning. Anyways, they came to me from California way back in those days, and it's more of an indica. And it's been in my collection for years, and it makes almost like golf ball, like round, heavily red-haired, cherry. It doesn't really have fuel. It's more like a sweet kind of candy cherry, like an artificial cherry smell. But we released it in a ton of different stuff, like cherry haze. Yeah, the cherry kush, we took the golden temple kush, which is something that was collected near Amritsar, India, years ago, and crossed it with the cherry bomb indica and did a BX1. Although now I think it's probably been inbred for 3 generations, depending on the seeds that you get from me. But yeah, guys are just, absolutely loving that one. And I have another one that Barney's Farm released as, what do you call it? Pineapple Express. And it's a C99 hybrid. We have a whole bunch of stuff that just thrives here that I know will thrive there. When I say thrives, it just stands up to everything, that the environment can throw at it, even rain and stuff. I have a new one called Sugar Blossom Skunk. And it's my skunk from scratch, cross C99, cross skunk from scratch. And man, it was one of my favorite. I don't think Kevin Jodry really liked it because he was so heavily sort of inundated and entranced by the pure sativas that he can't usually access. I was a bit disappointed because I thought he was going to give me a bigger response when I showed him that particular strain, but most people really fucking like it. Yeah, I'm sending you guys some real interesting stuff. I'm sure you guys will really dig it. And,
I'm ready. We're ready. I'm ready, man.
Yeah.
I just now got room to spread as you crack the knuckles, so to speak.
Right.
So,
Well, I think you guys, what you'll dig about them is just how well they'll perform in extreme heat and humidity, right?
yeah, out the breed. It's the memory. It's in there. I feel you.
Yeah, and just maintain, like even those plants didn't get affected by root maggots. Like there's certain ones that were just complete standouts, right? They're just kind of an environment. So I sent you guys a whole bunch of those ones and a bunch of other stuff. I'm sure you guys will fucking really love because it's unique. I'm sure you won't have anything like them in the collection. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. Speaking of heat and humidity, what kind of dry and cure process are you using in the tropics? It's a question we just got from Lugo in chat.
I dehums and air conditioning. Yeah, so you can't really, cut corners with it, and trying to dry without at least AC in this type of a tropical environment is really difficult. And so many people will grow really nice flowers and take it to the end and then fuck it all up. So
Yes.
so I really like climate controlled drying, and I don't wet trim, I hang dry. And hand trim. On the commercial stuff, we actually use trim bags.
Or how much fan leaves do you leave on, depending?
Oh, not much, man.
Okay.
No, I trim my weed old school. Again, it just depends on what it's for, right?
I mean, when you hang on the line, do you leave the fans before when you
Oh,
hang?
no. Okay, so when we're cutting down a plant, we'll take off all those big fans for the most part.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, just to get the airflow happening into the plant, right? So
Right.
we defoliate the shit out of it. In fact, I'll even have the girls do a pre-cut like the day before we're going to take down, right? Just so it's sort of ready. And then we'll go in and we'll limit, and we'll usually limit. It just depends on our hanging process. This particular crop's been very different because for 1 year, 100% of my production's been geared towards genetics. So I haven't been doing a lot of anything that's been not geared towards breeding. But typically, yeah. So I had all these fancy trim machines and all this shit in my first, like when I had the first farm here in Jamaica. I had twisters, like big double twisters and all that crap. And they literally just got put in a shed and locked up. And we hang dried and ran trim bags on all the commercial weed. I actually find that trim bag another innovation for the right flowers. But for commercial flower, and I mean like a lot of the big, dense, popular kind of common genetics that are sold in dispensaries and whatnot.
Right.
I find the trim bag works amazingly well. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if it's a cup level crop, or it's, high trips or quad weed, obviously I'm not going to let anything near a trim bag. But we're talking about a commercialized business, and I think that trim bag is such an innovation, really. It saves people a lot of money, and it saves a lot of time. So kudos to the trim bag people.
Right on. And I also a question. Do you cure your seeded flowers is the same as you would your unseeded, so to speak, your smoke flowers? Do you treat them the same when you?
No. In fact, sometimes, depending on the particular genetics, I'll actually turn my water lines off on the field and allow the plants to fully dehydrate on the field before they're harvested for seed collection.
Nice. Okay.
And you know what's really interesting, guys? I couldn't figure out why I couldn't growing true Afghan plants like Sari Pool. I couldn't figure out why is it my hash never tasted the same as the import and the weed and the hash that I smoked there. And I just ran some Afghans, and they were sun dried and fully mature because they were seeded. And that hash tastes exactly like the Afghanistan. So I kind of figured out why I can never quite get it the same, man, because of course the handling of the flower, the environment is everything, right?
Love it.
But I've got some Afghan here. If somebody told me that it was sent from Afghanistan, I'd actually believe them. And I'm a pretty hard nut to crack when it comes to imported hashes, because that's what I smoked first in my youth, right?
Right.
So I've always been a big lover of Afghan and Pakistani hash. And so I finally figured out, after years of of trying to duplicate the hashes that I smoked over there, that I just treat my plants too well.
That's all right though. That's great. You figure it out like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah, I really love making dry sift hash as well. It's one of those kind of fine arts that I've been into for a long time. And for me, indica is really about hash making, and sativa is for smoking flowers. That's kind of always been my outlook. I prefer to smoke indicas and hashes and sativas as cannabis.
Nice.
So
Is there
how's
much of a
Go
hash
ahead.
culture in Thailand?
There's starting to
so
be
they
now.
don't yeah, there's starting to be, but I mean, you have to remember there's no traditional hash culture here.
Yeah,
And concentrates
Well,
get you in quite a bit more
There
trouble.
was a little bit. There was a little bit because I've got the inserts from the hash block still. So I mean, they used to import it. We used to get it. My dad used to get it. So, but
Yeah.
not a lot. Like I said,
Right.
the 3 kilo sticks were the main thing that came in.
Interesting.
Yeah, there were. Yeah, but I haven't seen anything really like super resi large trichome size. Like most of the Thai stuff and Lao stuff and Cambodian stuff, Vietnamese stuff that I've seen out here, is much smaller on the trichome side on the finishers. You know.
It's true.
Really
The
finished
trichomes that are like waving to each other way apart. I get it.
Yeah, I actually just made a super lemon lao into a hash, and it won't press, eh? It's super sandy, and it has high terp value and everything. It's lovely, and it fucking knocks your head off, but it just will not press into a cohesive hash that other varieties will. I've had different Thai varieties in the past, produce some hash that I could press, but it was really interesting that the super lemon lao just would not press.
Do well with the way we modern water sieve and and then press into rosin, because that's the goal is to actually get it out. You want the more brittle heads, right?
Yeah.
When you're using water.
I really don't enjoy that rosin process. You guys, I went and spent all this money before I left Canada.
No, but I'm just letting you know, as someone looks at plants in that way, that plant probably does perform really well in that direction genetically.
Yeah, but I was kind of disappointed because I got so into hash making for so many years. I thought that I might enjoy the rosin thing, and for me it just wasn't something that clicked at all.
No, it's a hype thing right now, but it in reality it's a secondary product, right? From good full melt hash, properly sieved, that's the ideal, and then whatever else doesn't melt, you press into rosin, and somehow that has trended into people putting almost the entire thing in there and just pressing it into rosin, because that's the easiest way to deal with the shitty crop, and they don't realize that, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's interesting how popular it became in Canada in the last while. I had made all this hash. I did a huge crop on Salt Spring Island in 2020, and the market was just fucking tanked. And so I made a whole bunch of dry sift, and guys were saying, man, you need to press that into rosin. So I went and bought all that fucking material, and I'm like, tell you what, buddy, how about you come to my house and press it to rosin? Yeah, it was an interesting one, but yeah, my family and I have made a lot of hash, man. And we're kind of in that mode here right now because we have all these flowers that go through the seed blower, right? We have a machine that blows the flower and the trikes and everything and just leaves the seeds in a cup. And so we've been running through processing all of that flower, and some of it is kind of shitty because of broken heads, and others are turning out actually amazingly well. But yeah, we're we're sort of really enjoying our hashes right now here in Jamaica. But here in Jamaica too, there's not much of a hash culture. I mean, they hand rubbed like in the Charas tradition in Westmoreland and in certain areas of the country years ago, sort of for the tourist trade. I don't know how commercial it was, but even the extracts, I think Jamaica is going to remain a kind of a flower smoking country. It's just so ingrained culturally that I'm not sure whether or not extracts and hash would ever really catch on here.
The gum, they call it gum there in
Yeah.
Westmoreland, and that stuff is super tasty.
Yeah.
Funny story, you might even know some of the people in the story. Second. Okay, so I just got to Jamaica, and I brought a little dab rig the second time I came down there because I had a bunch of gum and stuff I wanted to smoke and try smoking it like on a clean glass thing instead of with a flower. And I hadn't met my business partner's wife yet, and so I'm sitting in the kitchen, like or on the porch or whatever it was, doing it, like heating up the dab rig, and she comes up and sees me with like a blowtorch in the glass. She freaks the fuck out and kicks me out the house and makes me like wait down at Scotchy's down the street. And finally, I had to call. They are real good friends with Rasa Aggie, and I ended up having to call Doc and get Rasa Aggie to come down and explain to his wife that like it's ganja and that it's not anything else. And it literally took like 4 hours of like explaining to get her to like calm down about it. It was hilarious.
That's an awesome story, man. And I could totally see that happening here too. Yeah.
Yeah, because they associate glass with like hard drugs in Jamaican culture. Like papers
Oh,
is
for
for weed
sure.
and glass is for everything else.
They just think the white boy smoking rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny. How is the situation there in Thailand culturally in the drug scene with all this new development? Is it has it changed a lot? I mean, it's going to because of the shops, but is it chill or is there violence or anything?
No,
Chill.
so in the weed trade, there isn't like farms whacking each other or anything like that that I've heard of. If it is, it's being kept very quiet. But most of the stuff that you see, like every time you see something crazy in the news, it's someone on meth, which they call yaba here. It's all
Yeah.
like there was just an incident in Pattaya. Some guy was throwing all the furniture out of like the 5th floor of his hotel room, like trying to hit people, and it was like, oh yeah, no, at first they were like, we don't know what drugs he was on yet, but we're worried about this legalization. And it's like, no, he's just on meth. And it's like, well, yeah, like no one's gonna fucking get high on weed and start throwing furniture out the window. Like it's just not how that drug works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not a drinker myself, and so I'm not like a bar fly or anything. So I've always been, my kids, everything. I didn't really have people drinking in my house or anything. So my kids have literally been raised around like cannabis culture in the extreme. And they all work with me as well, not all of them. The older two, one's a journalist. He's in Africa right now, and my other one's actually a mental health nurse in Canada. But my younger two actually run my farm and put up with the eccentric old man pretty much 24/7, 365. And Kevin Jodry was kind of blown away by them because he interviewed them about like the drug war and me going to jail when they were little and helicopters and all the kind of shit that they were exposed to, growing up. And yet look where they are, right? And they're like, 26 and 22, and this is what they chose, right? So it always kind of made me wonder if it evolved in the black market. I would have never exposed my kids because I wouldn't want them to go through some of the difficulties that I did, but it's kind of interesting because I would have thought that perhaps my son, who is actually he's an award-winning photographer, right? A conflict photographer and shit. I would have thought that considering he worked in the cannabis industry, the legal one from his 18th birthday, I kind of thought that he would be here. And actually my middle daughter, Liberty, seems to be the one who really is taking the bull by the horns and will probably take over the entire collection and stuff when I go. So it's been a kind of full circle for me in that, you know, I started selling seeds in Canada in 1995, and I raised my kids, and I didn't do anything else after they seized my farm and stuff, except for this. 2 years after I got out of jail, I won Canada's first Cannabis Cup. And like I was saying earlier, I kind of skirted all over the world. After I won the Cannabis Cup, it opened up doors, right? And Dave Watson said, "You really want to grow a population of plants?" And he's like, "For sure." He's like, "You understand the risks and everything." And he introduced me to people who got me that ability, right? And for me, it's been like a passion. And I could do other stuff. I did really well. My background's actually in animal genetics, and I work for major pig breeding companies and pork marketing council and stuff. But I just couldn't stop wanting, even in the times and periods when I tried not to grow. It just preoccupied my consciousness all the time. And so I finally just gave into it. And, you know, I've done work in Egypt, and I did work in Syria before the Arab Spring, you know, and I did work in Mexico, and I didn't grow in Colombia, but I went to consult on grows in Colombia. And this was all before, you know, legalization. I was just like, wherever I could get in to like maybe get some work in, and that period of work would like support my family for a period of time. And so after I won the cup and stuff, and Mark Emery got arrested, I split out of Canada, and I went and did that work, based my company out of Amsterdam, and I went and did that work in the Middle East, well, North Africa, actually, not the Middle East. And that funded my family's move to Mexico, and my kids went to a school in Mexico, and I worked and lived there. And then by the time I got out of there and came back to North America, I could get medical licenses on my house, right? And so I came back and did work in Canada. And I remember the first crop that I did under a legal license, and that license was only for 15 plants. And the RCMP parked 2 fucking police cars in front of my house when we trimmed, because the smell was wafting down a block, right? Because despite the fact it was legal, we had these oppressors that just couldn't believe that I had a trim crew in my house and it was legal. And so they just sat there for 8-hour shifts to intimidate the people that were working for us. And so it's kind of crazy, you know, now I come on working here, about to go to Thailand, had a 1.2 million square foot grow in fucking Canada. Like it's kind of, right now I'm kind of looking back and saying, you know, this was a fuck of a lot of fun. And I certainly didn't choose the way of the working class hero, right? And so yeah.
Amen.
And so growing all these plants that I just did was really a lifetime collection of genetics, and just like digging through them and trying to you know, keep them on, you know, keep them alive.
Yeah, I'm interested in that stuff. I tell you, a lot of it. Structures that just are, yeah.
Yeah.
To answer your question, though, we do have Thai social clubs, so that you can't you're not supposed to legally let people smoke in your dispo, but you know, that's not heavily enforced outside of, you know, the tourist areas. But the social clubs are becoming really popular. They'll have like it's like a bistro. They'll have like a kitchen. It's almost like a bar and a big grill, but instead it's a you know, it's a cannabis lounge.
Oh, nice. And they're kind of going up all over the country.
Yeah, they're everywhere, and we were just at one yesterday. So
what do you guys think is going to happen with this election? I heard that the opposition is like ahead in the election right now.
Yeah, so the thing is that sorry about that. So he has there's kind of 3 different scenarios, and 2 of them cannabis isn't going to really get messed with too much. They're definitely going to add some regulations. It kind of needs a few more regulations to kind of tighten the market up a little bit. But that's right now, it looks pretty promising. Like everyone's kind of chilled out a little bit. They're right now, the main two parties don't have enough, and they're like 70 short or 69 short of people in order to get the majority they need. And the pro cannabis party has 71 seats, so it's the easiest thing for them to negotiate to get to secure power. But until the other 250 people vote that are like the military chosen people, we won't know what happens. But after that, then we'll see. But the party that won wants to do some pretty major reforms that might not go over super well. So we'll see. You never know what happens in Thailand.
It's kind of hard to reel it back after letting it out, right?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly. You can't close the Pandora's box after it's open.
Well, the other bit of it is so Thailand almost never revokes business licenses, and all the business licenses are granted for 2 years. So I could see them doing something when those start to expire as far as renewing them or something like that. But I don't think, like, even if you had them, they're super against it, it's going to take them, I think it's 270 days from the moment they form the coalition before they can actually pass a law, and then it can go into effect. So in terms of cannabis, sort of a decree through the Royal Gazette. So, right now, even if that happens, nothing would change until early next year, even at the earliest. So,
What's crazy, guys? Had I known the way Thailand was gonna go, like if I had any fucking idea, the work that I just did would have been there. I was planning to retire in Kampot, Cambodia anyway, so I should have just followed my instincts.
Yeah, man, for sure. No one saw this coming, really.
No, it's
I never thought I'd be in Thailand. I never thought I'd live in Oklahoma either. I think that's just as much.
I'll tell you another thing. I'll tell you another thing about over here, the power of the plant when it was taken off that Schedule 5, it was what it did to the Yaba scene. That the Yaba pills average between 250 to 300 a pill, and after June 9th when they opened, it was amazing. The Yaba pills went down to 30 baht a pill. Nobody want that.
Really?
So epically, they let everybody out of jail that had a rap with any kind of cannabis, and then it just squashed the meth market. Everybody jumped on the Team Green thing. It was awesome. But one of the best things that happened to this kingdom was cannabis.
Yeah, and you have the meth issue here, and it's not even Thais that are doing it. The reason why it's such a problem is you have this civil war next door in Myanmar, and both sides of that war are producing meth basically in order to sell it so that they can fund the war. So you have a lot of Southeast Asia being kind of flooded with production right now from Myanmar because of the civil war there. So it's kind of like a lot of stuff is transiting through Thailand, but it really has been, the cannabis legalization really has done a major blow to helping suppress that issue here, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's amazing, guys. That's good to hear. Yeah, Vancouver is actually, we lost 10,000 people to the opioid crisis last year, for fuck's sake, man. 10,000 people in one fucking province.
Sad.
It's nuts.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy how quickly drug reforms are coming in, starting with cannabis. Be interesting to see. They just legalized hard drugs in Vancouver because of it. So it'd be interesting to see exactly, has the consciousness changed with cannabis, and now it's changing with psychedelics, and now the opioid crisis. I wonder if we're not going to see a shift in drug policy towards kind of, open access for adults in some of the more liberal places. That seems to be where it's heading, which I don't think is necessarily bad when you have 10,000 people dying because of a poison drug supply, right?
Oh yeah, well that's one thing you don't see a lot here in Thailand. One part is the culture, right? So if you have a drug problem, like you're gonna end up at the temple because you're not gonna have anywhere to go to get food or sleep, and then they're gonna like help take care of you and try to get you off or whatever, and try to like get you a job, get you a job at the temple for a bit. You're just sleeping so that you got a place to sleep and food in your belly, and then like build you back up, and then afterwards they like treat you like a normal person again. It's not like the North American culture where people are they like vilify people for having a drug problem, versus here where they like are like, oh, you're going through some bad shit. We're going to help build you back up again. It's a different way of thinking. And that also makes it so that when people do have drug issues, it's much less toxic to society here than it is in a lot of other places. They also
the
have
home-
the access to
the homeless
Kratom, which
group.
also helps with the opioid issue.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's depressing. Vancouver is just literally a sad place, and it was always like the epicenter of cannabis culture, going back like 30 years. And now we're not known for cannabis culture, we're known for fucking overdose deaths, right? It's literally, it used to be BC Bud was this common word, and now Bud's kind of gone more global. And yeah, it's interesting how society's changing. I'm not really much of a conspiracy theorist, because the right-wing shit I was raised with, we use that so much as misinformation and stuff. But right now, looking around at what's going on with society, I mean, we had Trump sort of open up this bold ignorance that was lurking, but didn't have a sort of a path to be heard, right? And now it seems like Biden is picking away at the very issues that were, embrazened by Trump's ignorance. Yeah, and economics and stuff. I think we're in a really interesting and transitional time, more than maybe we give credit for, overall, in our state of affairs as a society. Maybe we're heading towards the necessity of more of a global citizenship. I think that's really what the inevitable end reality will be as the scaffolding of imperialism collapses. Yeah.
Especially with AI, you're going to have a huge amount of the current workforce that is replaced by, a couple of servers. So that's gonna change things up quite a bit,
Yeah, for sure. But it's interesting how drugs has always played a role connected to the politics, even the way that cannabis was used, from the 60s through even into the 90s to fund political change. And now these very issues come to being such a forefront at a much deeper level in society than anyone could have thought. It's really
Absolutely. Well, we've had you on here for about 2 hours. I don't want to tie up your whole evening, but we definitely would love to have you back on again some other time in the future as well, once you're on to your next chapter and finding out what you're up to in a couple of months, maybe.
For sure, man. I'm starting to talk about politics. It's time to get that fat man off the fucking station. I'm
Oh
just
no, it's fine. We love to if you like jamming, we have a separate show on Thursdays my time, but Wednesday nights US time, called Dat Smoke Show, and we're a little more looser on the topics of the show. We try to be a little more focused, but it's totally fine. Like, that's, what it is, what it comes down to is it's still part of cannabis politics, right? Like,
oh, it is. Yeah.
politics is certainly playing a big role here in Thailand with the future of it. It certainly played a role for a long time in the United States, and still is playing a role in the United States. So
For sure. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
yeah, thank you so much. How can people find you or support you, or any other way that you want to let people know about anything else that you want to tell them about?
My website's actually down right now, getting changed to a different format, but Scott Family Farms on Facebook. And yeah, we have a PDF. What's going on right now is we just signing a distribution deal with a major UK distributor. So our seeds from this breed will start to hit the market in like the next probably 60 days, but they were available on scottfamily.farm, which will be back up. But we had some issues with Spotify not recognizing that cannabis seeds are unregulated in Jamaica. And so they cut my website because they said that I don't have a license to retail cannabis seeds in this country. But if you Google it, they're actually, cannabis seeds are legal, and it customs says you can send them through the mail. But anyways, that's why it's down. But you guys can check me out at Scott Family Farms on Facebook.
Wonderful.
Well,
Thank you so
I'm
much.
gonna be swiping up a lot of packs.
Right on. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we have a PDF too. I'm still shipping. So yeah, thanks, guys. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon. I'll see you guys when I get into Thailand, probably in August.
Right on, man.
Yeah,
Looking
definitely.
forward to it. Looking forward to it.
You stay
Yeah,
blessed.
definitely let me know. We'll be sure to get together.
All right, sounds good, guys. Take care.
Take it
Take
easy.
care. Thank you. And how do people find you there, Kanatai?
Facebook, IG, Canatai Seeds _official until unless I get my new one back, which is just Canatai Seeds.
And you guys can also find Dutch Blooms at Dutch _Blooms. He was on here earlier. You can find me at Ponics, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, all the things, as well as Rumble. We have the YouTube channel now is backed up on. So, you know, if anything ever happens to the channel, you can find all the same content. It is dual copied over each time we do an episode over here. So, and if you do have a cannabis content, you aren't aware of that, connect your YouTube account to Rumble so that you can automatically back it up because, you know, cannabis content is often targeted by YouTube. So make sure to check that out. And yeah, we'll be back again next week. Yeah, we have some cool guests in the queue. We have some cool events that we're working on out here in Thailand that you guys are going to be super stoked about, that we'll have a lot of information on, including the first events that a couple of different more famous people have actually done in person. So really stoked to be able to talk about that once we're able to. So take it easy, guys, for now. See you guys again next week.